All right, welcome everyone. OpenJS Foundation Standards Working Group. Today is Tuesday, May 16th. A lot of us are coming up off of a great week in Vancouver, where standards was a very popular topic in sessions and in the hallways. So I think we can jump right in. Jory's out today, so I'll run the agenda with all your support. Okay. First up, we have issue 233. I don't see has Ethan joined the call?
Not yet.
I don't see Ethan.
Yeah, I was looking in the winter CD to see if he was around too, but it doesn't seem like he's online there either.
He seemed to think the meeting was canceled. Perhaps he tried to join at 9 or something.
Oh, good old timing bits.
Yeah. Do we want to try pinging or do we want to just move on to the next issue? Ping.
I mean,
ping
let's do
Ethan
both.
and see.
Yeah,
Okay, and then we can maybe move it to the end of the agenda. Okay. Okay. All right, well, let's hit the next topic and see how we go. Issue number 232, the W3CAB election ballot is due June 1st. Anyone want to give an update to the team on sort of the process? Toby, you're the alternate, correct?
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
Mhm.
So this is a bit of a special election because a significant number of candidates for this election were actually elected like 6 months ago and had to rerun for some form of like process reason that frankly I have forgotten. Like there was a thing and that thing happened and hence so essentially it's very much sort of like reconfirming kind of like the people that were elected 6 months ago. So expectations are, unless they did something terrible, it's pretty much going to be the same people. Though the number of members that actually vote is really low in general. And so, depending on who actually decides to vote, this might change things a little, right? I haven't looked at the list of candidates, but I think we should always sort of, obviously it would be great if we voted, right? I don't know, I actually haven't thought about whether there was a specific position that OpenJS should have or folks that we wanted to actually push. So I don't know if like folks have thoughts. I mean, Michael knows all of these people.
Yeah, there's been a bit of discussion, I think. Yeah, so there's 9 candidates for 6 seats. Not all the people elected are rerunning. For instance, Charles Neville is not running this time. But yes, it's to a large extent a recap of the previous election. So, which by the way was a special election because about half four members of the AB got elected to the board of directors. So
that was the reason. Thank you, Michael. Yes, obviously, yes.
But yeah, it's yeah, anyway, there's been some discussion. I think it's, yeah, I don't think I think Jory will eventually come back and say, here's her recommended ranking, and we will have a chance to confirm or push back on that. But yeah, it's not, I don't think there's a whole lot of drama here. So
I agree. It's fairly straightforward.
yeah, and there aren't
the
any.
AB's. Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
No, please, you go.
I was trying to break in and say, it's tricky because this uses STV, and as you say, not a lot of people show up. There's a lot of seats. So maybe that's one of the better things when there's plentiful candidates for a lot of seats. I think STV works a little better. But yeah, you have to rank them, and only one of them is ultimately going to be counted, and you kind of don't exactly know which one is the important. Definitely, you know, in the first four, I think, are the most important. There are a lot of incumbents here. Generally, the incumbents are doing a pretty good job. So place most of them in at least the top 6, you know. Yeah, we've had a little bit of discussion. I think we'll just probably carry on discussions and then make a recommendation.
Brian, do you want to remind folks just what their primary role, mission is at the org?
The advisory board, mostly they're in charge of the process, which is like sort of the constitution of the W3C, like how it works in every facet. It's basically the document that it's just called the document in a lot of cases, or the process that defines how everything works, more or less. So that needs, you know, constant update and maintenance because we tweak it a lot. Nobody really knows what they're doing in perfect sense yet. So trying to iterate on that constantly.
Great.
Yeah, probably the biggest thing there were, so W3C, so for W3C's whole history, Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of HTTP and HTML and URLs, was the nominal benevolent dictator. And he is more or less officially stepped away now. But he was the person they went to resolve the gnarliest disputes. I mean, they try to operate by consensus, but when a few members, especially critical members, dig in their heels on something and what they call formally object, Tim has traditionally been the judge of last resort. He's gone, and they're trying to write down the values, the guiding principles that should be used in dispute resolution. And that's an extremely slow process, but the advisory board is driving it.
Yeah, but they don't actually have any. They don't have any real power.
They
have the power
they're on they are half of the what do you call it, the dispute resolution councils, formal objection councils. So they are in principle, there's like 20 some odd people who are eligible for these councils, and the AB are among them. So anyway, but going forward, it's most of their traditional power has been to just try to give the team, some reality checks, and the board of directors now has that formal responsibility, and they're stepping up to it. So it's a bit of a transition period.
Yeah, I was trying to say they don't have any power historically. Historically, their job is to advise the AC. And so even when they make changes to the process or whatever, it's the AC that has to ratify that or not. So now Michael's totally right that with all the changes, it is a lot of work to reimagine that, because you probably wouldn't know it, but the process document had the word director like 250,000 times. Like it's just everywhere, like everywhere in the process. There's a, and you probably should check with Tim kind of aspect to it. And now there isn't a director that anybody trusts the way that they would trust him, right? Like even if we could find somebody to fill the director role, it's not Tim, and we probably don't want those rules to apply that way. So means figuring out things like these councils, which does actually give some power to people who are on the seats in a way, and those people are elected from the AB and the tag, which is kind of interesting, but yeah.
Great, lots of changes there. I know they're also hiring a new CEO. They've been reaching out to folks. I believe the deadline was last week. I believe if you're interested, I could send anyone's name to the recruiter or others. So lots of changes taking place. All right.
Yeah, that said, I do think, I was at the AC meeting last week. And although there are lots of organizational changes, it really feels that the organization as a whole is essentially regrouping around like its prior role and just sort of like figuring out things to continue in the same way. So whereas, there were concerns that the transition was kind of rocky, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
But I think those considerations are mostly behind the organization at this point. And I'm expecting sort of like the next 2 years to be sort of like consolidation around like this new structure, and not a hell of a lot of changes outside of that.
Good to hear. All right. Anything else? All right. So next on the agenda is issue 231, TPAC, which is September in, I believe it's Sevilla, Spain. Is that correct? So just a side note, you may have all seen that the program committee decided to postpone the security workshop with the W3C, OpenJS, OpenSSF, and OWASP. We met yesterday again with the programming committee and really just trying to figure it out. We thought, do we need to reschedule to September in Spain with TPAC and Open Source Summit North America or Europe? We haven't quite landed on a decision. We think maybe virtual may be a way to go, hybrid. So we're looking at sort of pros and cons on that. Definitely, I think we're seeing that travel budgets are pretty tight this year with the economic downturn. So we're trying to be respectful of that. So if anyone wants to participate, they can. And we're also trying to get a little more crisp on what we want the focus of the workshops to be, to really energize people. Maybe even curate a few speakers just to sort of spark some more CFPs. We didn't have as many as we had hoped. Okay. So jumping in to the TPAC event, breakout sessions. Do we have kind of just a raise of hands here who actually plans on attending that event in Spain? Brian will be there. Toby. Más o menos. Anyone else?
Leah's
So I
hand
guess. Oh, hey, yeah, of course. There you are. To scroll over. And I think Jory all wanted to know if I'm sure you all are submitting to speak solo, but I think she's interested in perhaps doing a breakout session as well. I may just bookmark this. I don't know what the CFP deadline is.
But breakout
I think if
sessions
you're
usually
interested,
like 5 minutes before the actual breakout session is the deadline. In general, I mean, there's lots of leeway if you have a good topic and people are interested. It's better
Okay.
earlier, but like there's no, I don't think there's like a formal thing. Sometimes there is.
Okay,
I think since we've been doing them like virtual and hybrid, there have been, because they need to make sure that we have like the rooms, like, because they're like wired up and everything, so.
So do you have a sense of when it is? Is it still dawn?
No,
Still like
you're right,
responsible
though. It
for
will
this?
be very late. Yeah, it will be very late in the process.
okay. Alrighty. Well, we can bookmark that, but if you have some ideas, I recommend you start brainstorming with Jory, perhaps on Slack or Standards channel or with her. Okay. What else? Let me go back on the schedule. So I end up on the wrong issue again. Let's see. My GitHub is being squirrely. I don't see that we have any other open issues. Let me look at PRs, minutes. Toby, if I look at our PRs on the OSI representative, has that been concluded?
I don't know that it has, because I wasn't there at the last call, and I think it wasn't discussed.
Okay,
I can give a bit of context if folks need
yeah,
context.
that would be great. It's PR 224.
So the OSI is the Open Source Initiative. It's a nonprofit that regroups a whole, like a large number of other nonprofits and membership organizations, essentially around the definition of open source licenses and the process of reviewing open source licenses and essentially certifying them as being an open source license or not. Which is a delicious process that happens on the mailing list that has a terrible reputation for, just in case you wanted to actually go have a look. But outside of that, it's an incredibly important organization, and it has, over the course of the last couple of years, strengthened its policy arm in response to a lot of upcoming regulation, both in the EU. You've probably heard about the CRA, the Cyber Resilience Act, that could potentially very badly impact the usage and maintenance and production of open source in Europe. And similar regulation that's happening in the US right now. But hopefully that's at least right now looks less harmful to the open source community. I bumped into an open issue on the standards repository where Miles was saying, hey, I'm no longer sort of involved here and I'm stepping down from my OSI role. And that was still open. It was like 2 or 3 years old. And since I actually spent quite a significant amount of time on these open source definition issues, partially from my some of the consulting work that I do, and that I work on a regular basis with folks at the OSI who are focused on this. It just makes sense for me to take on this, like do this through the foundation if the foundation wants that, hence offering to do it in that way. So that's essentially it's a liaison role with the OSI. And I think it's important right now because of the potential impact of the CRA. And I think that other interesting aspect is that to positively impact legislation in the EU, a thing that is really important is to get like actual European citizens who would be impacted by legislation and who are able to say, hey, wait up, like, my whole sort of like life would be upturned by this. And so having this liaison with such a large pool of maintainers and developers that OpenJS actually has could actually be fairly valuable to OSI, who doesn't have such a large, large access to actual developers. So I think there's like something interesting there, at least to try and leverage.
Great. Any questions for Toby? discussions broadly?
I'm surprised by your optimism that you think we'll be able to affect legislation, but that sounds awesome.
I mean, there was a lot of work going on between the Open Forum Europe, the OSI. There's, just to name two, and there was a lot of corporate support for trying to push this legislation, because the impact of the text as they are right now would be like devastating for open source in Europe and for Europe, frankly.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, what I've very clearly heard from circles around Brussels is that like real examples of like real people actually being impacted is one of the most powerful tools that you can leverage. And so, if we can, we should.
The Linux Foundation is also playing a role, Linux Foundation Europe, and we also at the OpenJS Foundation signed a letter on the Cyber Resilience Act with a couple of other LF foundations. So
Yes, thank
Have a
you,
lot of
Robin.
fun.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
Gab, who's leading the newly funded LF Europe, is driving this also. And so, like, I mean, it's a really big deal in Europe. Like, any organization that like can is actually trying to do something right now.
yeah.
Yeah, I support this if you're willing to invest the time, Toby. I would ask that you keep us informed, fairly regularly, what is happening there. And that, when possible, you build a consensus of this group before, taking positions.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
So, but especially keeping us informed. I mean, I think that's the argument of why to have somebody on the ground is to keep us informed about these things. So if, when you have engaged or you are about to engage, letting us know with what your plans are and what the, result was would be very valuable.
Sure, absolutely. For context, right now, I think first plan is just to keep a finger on what's on the pulse of what's going on, and if something comes up, then come back to this group to see what we can do.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
So Toby, let me know how we can help on the process to make this happen.
I have no idea. Yes, I will look into this.
Once we all figure.
Yeah, I don't know. I can reach out to Miles to see, or I can reach out directly to the OSI to see. I'll do that.
Yeah,
I'll do
if I
that.
recall, I do remember when Miles was appointed, it was over 3 years ago, so I'll have to go do an archaeological dig and see
No,
as well.
it's cool. I'll figure it out.
Okay,
I'll let you know.
awesome. Great. Hey, I see Ethan's here. Hey, Ethan, glad you could join. We're gonna head back to issues and hit that one at the top of the list. Issue 233, discuss package JSON standardization and governance. Ethan, you want to give a quick little level set on what you're looking for?
Yeah, of course. So thanks y'all for waiting for me. Had a little miscalendar on my end, and then there's a Vercel incident that I had to bow out of. So yeah, so for this one in particular, package JSON, at the Collab Summit, I'll give a little bit of background. There was expressed basically just the idea of like package JSON has traditionally been documented in many different places around the web, including NPM and Node.js. And I like to bring up Webpack. It's also used in it's also been documented for usage in tools like ESLint and Jest. And essentially it's very fragmented how you actually utilize package JSON. And so there is some inkling or some desire for some way to try to bring that all into the same place. And that, of course, makes everyone think first, including myself, of a specifying. So creating a specification for package JSON. And with that specification, the reason why I'm coming here is, let's say we were to specify package JSON. And I don't want to have the conversation here about what we're going to specify or how we're going to specify it, but let's just say we specify it. What like organizational structure may we need to build around that in order to best support that effort? And I provided some options like, should this exist in a standards body such as TC39 or like WHATWG or whatnot? Or should it be like open governed? And what does that mean? Like, do we create is it just a GitHub org that has, once a month meetings about, work done on it? And then that org is responsible for managing the specification. And then in that case, if the specification is open governed, is it, where does that lie with like, is it actually standardized or not? So very loose right now. I'm kind of still in the like investigation stage of all of this, trying to get as much information as possible so that I can try and build the best solution we can.
Comments? Question?
Yeah, that I would put a big vote for this, like how it happened on the console API, because console was used in multiple browsers, but we didn't have any standardization over it. And it would be great to see package.json also to be part of it. And I'm happy to collaborate and contribute in whatever meaningful ways possible.
Hemant, were you involved at all with the standardization of the console API across the browsers?
No, it's closely following it and influencing it, but not really in terms of implementation or changing the spec. Okay.
I think that's a great call out nonetheless, because we are definitely looking at previous history of things, because that will be a great way for us to see like what has been done previously. So thank you.
Mhm.
No
Great.
problem.
Toby.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be the party pooper here and talk about intellectual property, but you will have to make sure that you have the blessing of the people who actually have defined the existing structures that you want to bring together in an open body in order to be able to do that, right? So, I mean, that's, I don't know how far you are with that conversation, but, clearly having NPM and, the other folks who, well, you mentioned like a number of places where this was happening, where this had happened, and making sure that they are on board and are happy to contribute their intellectual property to somewhere, right? It's fairly probable that a lot of a good chunk of like what's going to allow you to make that decision is where they are happy to bring their IP to. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. And in fact, I've actually commented that in the thread about this exact question. And one of the ways I want to look into that is I think I asked, yeah, what is a good way to approach key stakeholders? I'm here looking for like all of the info and all of the insight that everyone here can provide. So like, what is the best way we could approach NPM, Yarn, Node.js, PNPM, even like everyone in the game, and be like, in an inclusive, productive, solution-driven way, how can we approach them with like what we're trying to do here that doesn't make them maybe feel like, oh, we're coming for them, or oh, blameful this or blameful that. But more so, generally, like NPM is owned by GitHub, owned by Microsoft. If NPM is the documentation for package JSON right now, like, are we gonna have to face like legal lawyer like speak to like figure this out to get through this IP law? Like, what is there? I have no idea. That's what I'm here to gain.
Right before I call the next hands, hey man, did you finish your questions? I'm sorry if I cut you off. I see your hand is still up.
On my interface, it's not.
Oh, okay, you don't see it. All right. So why don't we hit Wes?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I'm not actually sure if there is clear ownership from NPM or Microsoft in this case, right? So these things predate like a ton, like some of the decisions predate, I think, even the formation of NPM. So it might be like individual contributors who actually own some of the IP here, right? So like if we even just break it down by field, like I think the name and version fields like predated probably back to like Isaac, probably would be my guess. I'm not sure exactly how the handoff happened.
I'm sure it's Isaac, and I'm sure that he ensured that the NPM company obtained all the rights necessary at that point. But I'm also like, given that NPM and Node and many tools have all used it, like, I don't know how anyone could really claim ownership of it, especially since there wasn't a central authority. There was just, this is what NPM does.
Yeah, and that's my concern is we're gonna like by approaching this with the goal of an actual standards body owning it, we have this problem. I think this is why I'm pretty interested in finding sort of a more, at least to start, a approach here that just sets us up to have some agreement. And then if we get to a point where we've identified, here's a clear IP owner of this field and this field and this field, and they've signed off. And here's a clear owner of this field and this field and this field, and they've signed off. Then I think having the conversation where we move it to the next stage, which is like, yeah, what would it take to then take this to a standards body and get that chunk of the work standardized? I think is going to be a lot easier than trying to like go whole on it right up from the front, because again, it's like, this is a very distributed set of folks, and you know, obviously we should try to get them in, but I think if we just say actually going to a standards body is a 5 to 10-year plan, and maybe that's too long, but something that's further out, and we say in the short term what we want to do is make sure we just don't make any mistakes that would prevent us from then going to a standards body later, right? So like getting all the sign off is like probably maybe should be like a non-goal to start. If it just so happens and everybody just comes out of the woodwork and says, oh, please sign me up. I want to give this to the, to a standards body. Obviously that would be an amazing outcome, but I don't see that being likely. So I'm wondering, is there any advice that folks have specifically toward that? Like just here's a mistake you should not make if you are trying to prepare for this possibly landing in a standards body someday. Even if it's not like a primary goal today.
Mm-hmm. Toby?
I hear you, Wes. I do think it might be good to have a conversation with the NPM folks to see if they're up for it or like absolutely hostile to the idea. Because if they're absolutely hostile to the idea, then it's going to be like really a really difficult set of next steps. I would start by, I mean, like this should not be contentious, frankly. It doesn't look like a contentious topic. It doesn't look like a topic where there is a lot of valuable IP in the background, such as patents or things like this. So it doesn't look like I would have conversations with people to see if there's a will to go in that direction, and understand if there is not, because you're better off knowing about this right now than once you've actually done a whole bunch of work, right? And I also think that between folks here and in the CPC and in the board, you will find a number of good connections to put you in contact with the right folks within the relevant organizations. I think you should start. I would strongly suggest starting with this, because I don't see how anything else will create a different outcome. Like I don't think that standardizing the actual thing is the hard part. I think that the hard part is getting the agreement that like this is what we want to do, And I mean, like, you will need to get approval from like folks who are able to give approval for that, which kind of applies to lawyers, I'm afraid. But it's not going to be that, I don't think it should be that bad. Like if everyone's willing to do it and sees value, there's no reason for it to be like a difficult thing. It involved a little, but I don't think it should be difficult.
Is there a way that the undertaking could be endorsed by OpenJS and its stakeholders? And then Ethan, obviously you have Winter CG probably endorsing it. Would that, it seems like that would assist your buy-in, right, from those stakeholders? So
Yeah, I think that's kind of my next question was going to be, it really sounds like buy-in is going to be our biggest challenge. And also not even challenge, but also just like, that's the biggest first step. And we talked about this at the conference, we talked about it, some folks in DMs and even in the GitHub issue. So like from the OpenJS side, or even just from personal connections, like, could we draft up almost like a plan of attack of like, here is what we're going to send. And it could be me, like I will personally like reach out individually to all of these folks, but like, is there like a connection could be made? Like, I don't know the guy who builds Yarn or maintains Yarn. I believe it's a singular individual. And it's like, if someone does know him personally and is on a good network, could they like put me and him together and like be like, cool, let's like, here's Ethan introducing, take it away. Similarly, like the endorsement from OpenJS would be wonderful. Like, here's a new project initiative that I'm spearheading on behalf of OpenJS Foundation and Winter CG. I'm here to talk with you to figure this out. And like, that would be a really awesome, I guess, like first step here.
Well, NPM has the RFC repo, right? Would that be a good spot to kind of propose this, or are we thinking on those lines?
It would if the RFC process is still happening.
It's not the same anymore. And also I think this probably needs to not be an open RFC thing. I think it needs to be like an internal, like they're probably going to have to go talk to their lawyers. So I think it's just the scope is a little different.
What I would say is that NPM's current staffing constraints are going to mean that there's zero effort paid to this for a while, but without their effort, it's unlikely to be much progress short of just gathering the rest of the stakeholders. So that's something to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Leah had her hand up and then down, and then had some good points in chat.
The conversation kind of moved on. That's why I lowered my hand afterwards. But like, one of the things was to point out my point in the chat that standardizing in an existing consortium has several benefits. One of them being patent protection, at least with W3C. I'm not 100% sure what goes on with what WG and their patent protection. Another thing is that various stakeholders already recognize and respect work that tends to come out of these consortiums compared to like this ad hoc group. But also there are more lightweight processes these days for incubating a standard. It doesn't have to be an either or, either we do it under W3C, for example, or we just like come up with our own group. There are community groups, there's YICG, whose purpose is exactly incubating standards. I mean, obviously it doesn't have the same patent protections, but there's an existing process from a YICG spec to eventually being a working group spec. And also I was thinking, I really like the idea overall of a standardizing package.json. In addition to the reasons that have already been mentioned, I was thinking one of the benefits of standardizing this would be to define explicit extension points, because right now it's like anything goes, like random tools just add random keys to the root, which is not great for future extensibility.
Yeah, big plus one. That's one of our major points. I really liked what you were talking about, like putting it when you get it to a standards body, there's like that patent protection. I want to poke at that if I can a little bit. On the flip side, the open governance model really stood out to me when people described that to me last week. What more is there to that? Let's pretend a little bit. We get buy-in from all interested parties, and and we say, okay, we're going to go open governance. What does that mean for like, yeah, what does that mean?
Toby.
Yeah, what does that mean? What I mean, so what does that? What do you mean by that exactly?
Sure. So I think what was described to me, and at least my understanding of open governance is like, I'm going to go and create a new GitHub org called package JSON, like that's the org name or something. And then that org is going to have the repo that is like admin, and that's going to hold the monthly meetings. And then there's going to be the spec, and then there's going to be the tooling, and then there's going to be like, and it's like it's run like that, where then like I participate on behalf of maybe Vercel or maybe OpenJS or maybe WinterCG, and then maybe Wes participates on behalf of Node.js, just like random, like there's a individual who participates and represents all the major stakeholders. And there's, in my head, there's a governance model for like how you run elections and how you run like, you know, how a member becomes a member of this open org and how a representative becomes a representative. That's what's in my head. And please correct me if it's totally off base.
Toby.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you for clarifying. What you're describing is essentially the structure that you will find in a foundation or a consortium, except you will have to invent everything from scratch, get a lawyer to approve and write a whole bunch of stuff. It's going to cost you, I don't know, 200 to 350K to just like set everything up. And then you will have to spend another 100K a year to run the thing. And so you're probably better off like doing that in the structure that like has everything set up for you for that, and you know, we'll provide it for free. And essentially like the fun parts of that, you know, the ones that are attractive and just let you like band together and do the work that you want to do, like that's fairly, you know, that's an available thing in a bunch of different organizations. I mean, the WYCJ that Leah was mentioning before, you know, fits that. The LF has a similar kind of structure. Like there's a whole, you know, that's fairly available. So I would strongly advise you to go with something like this if you don't want to turn yourself into a lawyer, a friendly person for the next like year and a half and do nothing else but that.
That's a great.
Yeah, the Linux Foundation. Yeah, the Linux Foundation has this JDF, and they're essentially templates for doing that as well.
Okay, perfect. So that's exactly the answer I was looking for. And then sounds like there's many avenues there, which we will explore almost kind of when we get there. Like, let's, you know, we got to solve buy-in first, and then we can, but it sounds like there is paths forward there. Which kind of leads me to like, maybe try to wrapping this up. I don't know if there's any other topics or not for today that we want to make space for, but just like, what are some good next steps here for me directly? I am very motivated to drive this. And I said before, having those conversations or doing that outreach and getting people on board. So yeah, what are some good next steps that I should be looking at?
Toby?
So I think that, you know, as was mentioned before, folks are resource constrained more than usual, right? And so I think the biggest thing that you have to do is make the case for why there is value in doing this for the organizations that would need to do it. Like very clearly, what are they going to get out of it? What are the potential pains that this is solving? So I would go for like a one-pager of like, what's this for? You know, what problem is it solving, et cetera, right? In order to really be able to succinctly make a case for it and have people be able to take that document and go make a case for it internally to their legal team, their manager, et cetera, right? Because that's really what's going to be the blocker. It's just like, this is going to fall extremely low in the set of priorities unless there's a really good reason to do it.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, like a one-page position paper, put it in front of this group, put it in front of the CPC, the WinterCG folks, and then it can be sort of officially, you know, endorsed and then we can help you on that stakeholder identification, introductions, things like that. Wes, you had something?
Yeah, I was going to say, in producing a doc, I think we should very much focus on Jordan's feedback of this should be user-centered. What are the problems users have with the way the status of the world today? Those users could be the tools themselves, NPM and Node, but I think it also should probably cover like, what can we provide value to, you know, end users as well? Because I think there is stuff here. Like I have a bunch of examples. I want to be involved in the conversation, so I'm happy to pair on producing this document. But I definitely think starting less from the solution side and a lot more from the like, this is why this matters at all. You know, here's the user impact we hope to have. I think will be very important to selling is maybe not the right word, but to you know, helping buy-in.
It is. It
Wonderful.
is selling.
Yeah. I just had a thought of, what would be a conductive or productive way to like, I want folks like Jordan and Wes and everyone else as well to be like getting involved in this. And like, I'll take the onus of writing the doc, but then when I share it and we do this iteration and feedback, is there a place where we could be having these conversations? Is there a place like I already have sort of like the Winter CG like space to use. We can do it there. We can do it here. We can do somewhere else. So what would that look like?
I mean, we have collab spaces. This seems like an appropriate use of a OpenJS Foundation collab space. What does everyone else think?
Package maintenance working group.
Yeah, that's also
That's
an
what someone said.
opportunity.
So
That was what my
only
hand up was
Node or-
for.
well, my thing with that is that it's a node thing, right? And like
Mhm.
the specific goal here is getting the other runtimes on board. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think having a small discussion on how maybe like the package maintenance working group is the representative of the node project in this.
Yeah.
But I think like having the actual discussion not be a node thing would be is helping there.
We also, from the board perspective, we give a standards working group update to our board of directors as well as a CPC update. So, you know, you're welcome to come present to our board during that time when you're ready and have them take a look. So you were saying maybe outside the standards working group or a CPC thing?
I'm not sure. I don't fully know like the whole structure here of where all the pieces are. So I'm sort of happy to have it wherever. I think Wes made a great point that it needs to be something that all participants will feel is like equal ground. We very strictly want to make sure that we're not like there's any bias from the get-go, which is where Winter CG fits really well because all of the runtimes are already there and are already like, we feel that we can participate in voice and have that there. The package managers who are most important here, that's the kind of people who I'm like, they would be more than welcome inside the Winter CG space for this purpose. But maybe they don't feel as comfortable there. So is there something that the OpenJS could host or provide? Like that's what maybe a CPC or something like that.
Rick, do you have your hand up?
It was just in relation to like the like I had posted in the package maintenance working group because you know back when we were talking, you know, Jordan might be familiar, Wes will be familiar when we were talking about even just the from a package JSON aspect doing the support key for helping drive, you know, support and whatnot. And that was from a package JSON level. So that's why I kind of brought up the package maintenance working group as like Wes saying as being maybe the part stakeholder from the node aspect to drive that forward because you know we've done some level in that working group for adding stuff to support from npm CLI and stuff like that for the support key.
Okay, Toby, your hands up.
Yeah, what matters is getting the right stakeholders. And so mean, frankly, you could do that on like the, you know, a table. Like if you have the right people around the table, like that's like what you need, right? And so I think at this stage, like where it happens, I mean, you're just describing a problem. You're not like, there's no like IP involved. There's no governance requirements around this. This is like, you know, a project that you want to do. So, you know, the key thing is, if it doesn't matter where. I mean, frankly, it could be anywhere as long as like you have the right people in the room, you know, virtual room. But like that's what really matters. It's like the right people. And by right people, it's like the people that will need to do the implementation work, and that are influent and like actually driving the format forward. You know, standards when you don't have those folks around never work. Like ever, and you can do it if you don't have anything better to do, but it's like you know, mostly a complete waste of time. So yeah, right people, doesn't matter where. One pager is like really what I would suggest.
Thanks, Lee. So yeah, right people, happy to host, with the idea of you don't want to create duplicative meetings or meetings where most of the same people are attending. So let's think about that. Maybe if you're interested in participating, let me know, and I'm happy to coordinate with Ethan. And we'll check in with the CPC as well. But I think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe we can get creative with our working sessions or some of our meetings, just again, so we're being efficient about our convenings. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, likewise. Feel free to reach out.
Awesome. We are at the top of the hour. Jordan, was there anything big on TC39 we needed an update on, or?
I haven't done an update yet because we're only halfway through the second day right now. So
Okay.
Our lunch break ends right now and I'm going to hop back in it. So I'll give an update.
Awesome. Next time. Great.
Have fun.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.